Hi, I'm Marty Dixon, and today we're going to speak about Neptune. And I'm very grateful to Linda and all of her efforts and all of her friends and all of you for the wonderful astrology ideas and thoughts that you've shared with us. So this is a two-part lecture, and we'll break in the middle. And we're going to take a little look at Neptune from an EA perspective. So I called this this lecture out of the blue. We're going to look at a chart later, but we're going to get into a lot of Neptune reference to begin with, and it's quite heavy stuff. So I hope you'll stay with me. It's worth the effort. I was a student of Jeffrey's starting in '94, Jeffrey Green, and he always taught us that the value is in the effort. He'd say, come on, your astrologers, get to work, do your astrology thing. And he would really thump us, and she said, roll up your shirt sleeves and get to work. And then what would happen is we'd get to this pure essence of a discussion afterwards. It was so much worth all the effort and the study that we went into it. So that's what we're going to do in the first half, is really look at the archetypes and try to understand the EA, the Pluto paradigm, and look at Neptune and Uranus and Pluto and, of course, Jupiter in the natal chart, but mainly focusing on Neptune and Uranus, the two of the outer planets, two of the transpersonal planets leading up to Pluto, but we're going to emphasize Neptune. Neptune is pure consciousness in EA. Jeffrey taught that if you have water, running water, and you fill it in and you pour it into a bottle, that the water of consciousness takes on the consciousness of the container or the bottle. Well, we are, of course, water in a body, and that consciousness takes on our container very much so. And it osmoses who we are, and we osmose what comes from the universal water as well. Neptune is very hard to define. In fact, it is indefinable, but I'm just going to try to touch on some concepts so that we can try to look at it and try to understand it. And of course, I want to really emphasize that Neptune, being consciousness, pure consciousness, is very much a friend to Uranus, which prompts that consciousness. Uranus and the Aquarian energy and the 11th house prompt Neptune and Pisces archetype and the 12th house. It is sudden realizations, things that come out of the blue as well, but it's a little bit more electrical, a little bit more in your face, a little bit more, I'm not going to go away until you listen to me. So Uranus really prods Neptune to a large extent to extend our consciousness. And when you think about simple, basic human consciousness, a lot of us are in ego consciousness. A lot of us are. That means we think that we are who we were, what our birthright is, who we are in our family, how we fit into society, our life and our work, and how we go about that work, and our personality. Well, that's not all we are. We're much larger than that. We're an ego, we're a soul that goes back indefinitely in time, a soul that has reincarnated on this earth for so many lifetimes that it's unquantifiable. And at some point along the line, it is possible for people to wake up to what we call soul consciousness, and that realization that we are more than our ego, we're more than our role, we're more than our personality, we're more than what society defines us as being. My goodness, we've lived forever and ever, and we're hundreds and hundreds of lifetimes, and we're very old, and we have a soul that continues. And as students of EA know, Jeffrey taught us that the soul is immutable energy. It cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. So soul consciousness is something that a lot of people are coming into this lifetime. And of course, a lot of masters and great teachers have had it throughout all of time. And then if you look at Uranus, which is another reach of our consciousness, Uranus, and we'll get into this a little bit in the charts, Uranus really is as far as our human consciousness can fathom in a human body. It's higher consciousness, the higher mind, out beyond, thinking beyond all of the limits, pushing the limits. And then when you come to Neptune, well, Neptune really is all that is. you can't define it. It's great mystery. It's the original teachings, the original knowledge. It is, it always has been, and it always will be. So Neptune represents a great ocean of collective out there from whence we get messages as well, but they're very, very subtle. Okay, let's see if I can get this to move, Linda. Let's see here. Not, thank you. I'm new at this. So you are more than your thoughts, your body, or your feelings. You're a swirling vortex of limitless potential who is here to shake things up and create something new that the universe has never seen. We are much more than we can even fathom. The only way we can really visit Neptune and Neptune's territory is in our dreams and our meditation, and often in what I might call ecstatic nature experiences. We can only glimpse her. But we are so much more than our little lives down here. That's becoming apparent to a multitude of people. Jupiter just moved to Sagittarius today. And one of my favorite quotes is by Khalil Gibran, who says, "Say not, I have found the truth, but rather I have found a truth. Say not, I have found the path of the soul. Say rather, I have met the soul walking upon my path. For the soul walks upon all paths. The soul walks not upon a line, neither does it grow like a reed. The soul unfolds itself like a lotus of countless petals." So speaking of Neptune and Jupiter to Sagittarius, the ninth house Jupiter naturally squares the 12th house of Pisces. And so it prompts Pisces, and it prompts the consciousness of Pisces. And it prompts what we might call unity consciousness or collective consciousness that can only come in glimpses in a human body. And so the Jupiter to Sagittarius is really reminding us of our truth and to stay in our truth, and reminding us that we don't need to subscribe to anyone else's, that we can think freely and live freely. And it's really helping us to learn that we are much more alike than we are different. This freedom of thought and this freedom of belief really brings us together in a larger collective that says, again, I have found my truth, and I don't have to subscribe to anyone else's, and I'm going to stay on that path. Thank you very much. So that's a huge prod from Jupiter in Sagittarius today. I'd like everyone to just kind of settle in and take a breath and center and ground, and just take a moment to imagine Neptune. That's about the best way that we can approach her. She is nature, and in my opinion, nature is God. And so to me, the best way that I can even fathom Neptune is being in nature and immersing myself in the natural state and being in a state of meditation. Neptune also represents our relationship to Creator and our walk with Creator or Source. So take a moment to imagine that you are the endlessness, the vastness that is you. Imagine that you're wandering midstream and that you find a little boat, and then you're exploring mid-river all of a sudden. That's Pisces. Pisces is the water that flows downhill to the ocean. And Pisces is the expanse around our earth that is infinite. Pisces goes on forever and ever, but the only way we can really relate to it in our little life here down on earth is that we are a little soul in a body in a boat on a river. And if you just think of the water getting larger and larger, that's a concept of Neptune, how we can expand our consciousness, and many of us are. At many times throughout our lives, we receive messages from dreams, meditation, or out-of-body experiences. So Neptune can come to us in messages. And like I said, it's very, very, very subtle. You can miss it if you're not paying attention. But the messages from Neptune have always been there. It's nothing that you grow into or you have to learn or mature into, really. They've been with us all of our lives. They might have even been stronger when we were infants, and they might even become more potent when we're in our last days of life. So Neptune has always been there, knocking on our door, giving us guidance, giving us prodding. Have you ever felt in a moment that you're doing the right thing in that moment, and you're proud of yourself, you helped another person, or you did a really good thing? The feeling that comes over you saying, you're on the path, you're on the path. Yes, keep going this direction. That's Neptune. It's like a pat on the back saying, yes, you're growing into your immense infinite being, and you're starting to understand your walk with Creator. Sometimes messages from Neptune come through a quickened and cerebral antenna. Now that's mainly Uranus or the Aquarian influence. It comes from deep space. Sometimes they come through the deepest part of ourselves, our somatic body, like callings from the great cetaceans, a kind of soul sonar. All our earthly soul translating from beyond on Neptune. That was one of Jeffrey's favorite phrases on Neptune. But when you really let yourself go and you're in a good place, or sometimes you're in a sad place and you're seeking Creator, those are those moments of breakthrough with Neptune, when you just feel a feeling come into your emotional body and fall all over you, and you know that you're in the right place, you're on the right track, you're on the right path, and all is well. No matter what's going on in your life, I might say. So Neptune-Pluto orbits. As you can see by the slide, Neptune has a rather regular orbit around our sun, but Pluto is irregular. It's highly elliptical. And as you can see, at one point, Pluto does come into the orbit of Neptune. They are intrinsically joined. They are intrinsically combined. They speak to each other. Pluto being the furthest planet out in our solar system, I call the galactic ambassador. I think it's talking to all of the trans-Neptunian and trans-Plutonian planets and asteroids out there in the Kuiper belt. But at some point, this Pluto understanding and this Pluto outer worldness does come into Neptune's influence from time to time in both of their orbits around the sun. And so they're definitely conjoined at some point. They're definitely trading information. They're definitely speaking to each other and definitely related. And what I do think that Neptune brings to the whole Pluto consciousness and Pluto understanding that we're soul in a body is relatedness. We not only relate to ourselves, our God, our world, each other, we relate to all of creation, which is Gaia. Gaia is all of creation. And so Neptune in its consciousness is guiding us to more of a Pluto understanding, a deeper understanding, and Pluto in contrast as well is also talking to Neptune, which is like our outer antenna of consciousness. I want to talk a little bit about quantum consciousness today, or quantum entanglement. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the 100th monkey effect, and I don't know how to read your messages or hear back from you just yet, but the 100th monkey effect was a experiment that was started in the 1950s on remote Japanese islands, where scientists would observe many monkeys washing sweet potatoes that they gave them as a new food. And they noticed one particular very curious monkey that washed her sweet potatoes in the ocean to get the sand off before she ate it and gave it to her offspring. And then she noticed her offspring doing that as well. And then an amazing thing happened. After observing multiple monkeys on this island for a long time, they noticed that islands away across channels that the monkeys could not swim, the other monkeys were doing it as well. So what transferred? It wasn't physical. It had to be transferred through the ethers, a transference of consciousness, when enough monkeys actually caught on within the species how to wash their food. So it takes more than one person to affect the intent of Gaia. That's why we reincarnate on generational waves. Every generation, the Leo generation, the Virgo generation, the Libra generation, the Scorpio generation, the Sagittarius generation, we all have our generational intent, and we all work together to effect the intent of Gaia. That is what Jeffrey taught us. And so it takes more than one person, and it takes interrelatedness and understanding of how we relate to each other to really make an effect in how we live and how we relate to other people and how we relate to Gaia itself. And Gaia teaches us, if nothing else, Gaia, the creation of all things, teaches us to learn to give back, that is the basis of all life, all creation, all harmony, all wholeness. And I think that a lot of us are stepping up in a very quantum consciousness way now to understand the intent of Gaia, not just from our generation, but during the current generations as well, that we are here to learn to give back. Neptune. Neptune represents pure consciousness. It's ineffable as the wind, and can represent when and how our planetary spiritual collective consciousness can begin to shift on our planet. I believe that it is. We are going, what Neptune teaches us to first learn a personal inward realization of why we're here, so that we may affect the whole at some point. And I'm going to get into the north node of Neptune in just a moment, but the north planetary node of Neptune is the mid-degree of Leo. And it has been there for about 1,000 years, and it'll be there for about another 1,500 years. So we who are alive on this planet right now, and multiple generations before us and multiple generations to come, are all going to share the same planetary north node of Neptune in Leo. And I want to talk about a little bit today about what that means. What is the north node of Neptune in Leo, if not valuing our creativity and valuing our ability to co-create with Creator, and trying to live that life and give back of our special talents, our special purpose and destiny back to Creator and back to life in general, and back to the sustainment of Gaia on our planet. So the transpersonal planets of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto have a great pull pull on our individual egos. I don't know if I do have a pointer. The transpersonal planets pull on our individual egos to draw us into deeper soul consciousness. The inner and outer journeys at some point of all of our personal revelations become part of the collective. So what Neptune is teaching us from a pure consciousness level is come from the heart, be careful of your intent, be careful of what you ask, think about what your dreams are. It's becoming part of the collective. And that's a lot of the Leo North Node of Neptune as well, is that what you think and what you are predicating and what your intent is does create itself spontaneously and become part of the collective at some point. So we want to keep our hearts in a good place, because that's flowing out into the universe, whether we realize it or not. So here's another drawing of Neptune and Pluto. You can see our solar system here, and I'm sorry it's so small. And I don't know if you can see the pointer or not, but here's the pointer of Neptune. This is Neptune's orbit, which is a fairly consistent orbit around the sun. And then here is Pluto again, which is more of an elliptical orbit around the sun. And you can see to some extent that, well, you can't really see it very well here, but they do intertwine orbits, and at some point Pluto does come into the inner orbit of Neptune. And I'm sorry, I've lost my pointer. Bear with me, there we go. So Neptune definitions, I'm going to run through this as quickly as I can. Neptune is dissolving barriers, returning to the light, returning to home. It can be analogized to a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience, revelation, transformation, epiphany, spiritual encounter, or experience. Neptune is giving back. Let's see if I can highlight this. Giving back, returning, universality, timelessness, non-locality, meaning that we're not really, we can think outside of the body. We can think as far as the mind can stretch. That's what non-locality speaks to. It's compassion, unification, kindness. That's a huge one. People that are entering Neptune consciousness or unity consciousness really stress kindness in their work. It's very important to be patient and kind to others. That's how we learn to relate on the most basic level, is once we can entreat others to come to us in a kind nature. Neptune is forgiveness, giving back. These are lessons that our individual souls learn to carry over time, each in its own unique expression. Our evolutionary journeys guide us to the ongoing revelation of the great unifier, Neptune. So we're all on a path of greater unification and greater consciousness. And what we do carry, what I see in Neptune, what I saw in a dream, is that the Neptune influence in our chart, as well as the 12th house and the Pisces archetype, are all teaching us to really absorb our lessons, to really get them on the deepest level so that we never lose them. And I had a Native American teacher that taught us that those are the lessons that you carry when you get them on a soul level and they become ingrained deep within you. It's a term that Jeffrey used, I think he called inwardly realized, when we really, really get the lesson. And you can really, really get a lesson over and over and over again. There is so much love to learn and absorb and realize that it never stops. Neptune is realizing that separateness is an illusion, that our personal journey, although seemingly separate, is part of an ageless collective path. When you look at the 11th and 5th, the 11th and 5th houses of the zodiac, they are, as well as the second and the 8th, they are all fixed houses, and they're houses of immersion, of honoring our life force and our ability to evolve, whether it be bodily, spiritual, emotional, or cerebral. So if you look at the 11th house, which is ruled by Uranus, the 11th house of Aquarius, that is a fixed house of immersion. It's your cerebral capacity, your intellectual capacity, wanting to move beyond anything it's ever known before. And that 11th house of immersion, of cerebral concentration and yearning and discovery and exploration and experimentation, does lead us down the path to Neptune. It's all part of a natural order. Our gift is valuing our uniqueness and offering that expression back to spirit, which has first formed us. That again is the Leo principle, Neptune's north node. Our gift back is radiance, our light, and our voice. Our life back to the world, back to the collective, Gaia, and ultimately back to source, which I think is symbolized by the sun. I don't have a way to continue here. Bear with me just a moment. Well, I guess I just did it. Voila. Neptune has approximately 165-year orbit. Pluto is approximately 248 years. So you can see the larger influence of one over the other, but they do combine information, and they do Pluto does enter into Neptune's orbit at some point. So they're translating to each other, and they're relating to each other at some point. I like to look at natal charts that include the transiting lunar nodes in Pisces. That's one thing that's really important to me, the transiting lunar nodes in Pisces. And let's see, we just had a nodal ingress to Cancer Capricorn from, bear with me just a moment, from Cancer Capricorn from Leo Aquarius. So when I look at a chart, I do like to see a chart that has the lunar nodes in Pisces and Virgo. When I look at a chart, I like to see where the planetary ruler of the north node in Pisces is. So Pisces planetary ruler is at 13 degrees Leo. And I like to look at a chart and find out where that point lands in an individual's chart. It speaks to me about the Neptune paradigm, or the Pisces paradox, as I call it. Neptune is in a sign approximately 13 to 14 years. It rules the production of melatonin in the brain that causes sleep and the deepest brainwave state possible. I believe that this process is accelerated by Uranus transits. Our moon's nodes are approximately 18.5 year cycle and change signs approximately every 1 1/3 years. Quantum entanglement, 5D reality, and the hologram. We talked about the 100th monkey effect and the scientific observance of macaw monkeys washing sweet potatoes on islands of Japan. And we now know in our 21st century that subatomic particles, which are matter, actually can speak to each other. When subatomic particles are isolated and then stimulated over hundreds of miles apart, they still react to the stimulus. They still react to each other as if they were side by side. That's because of the combined energy fields that were once part of them. Energy is part of the wave theory, and particles are part of the particle theory, but we now know that anything that has once been joined together and part of the same substance, so to speak, can never really be separated. There's always a energy field around them that generates some type of reaction no matter what you do. And what does that say about us? Are we intrinsically combined? Are we intrinsically interrelated? Do we go on forever and carry the remembrance of the other? And then we also know from quantum entanglement that observed experiments are affected by the observer. So we have an influence no matter how faint you might imagine it. And I know that this is really lofty stuff, but we have an influence. If we're even looking at another, like right now, for instance, even considering another person, even thinking of another person, and that is Neptune, that observance and that thoughtfulness and those intents reach across time and all space. And this is one of my favorite quotes from It's a Wonderful Life, when Clarence the Angel told the actor in the movie, "Strange, isn't it, how each man's life touches so many other lives. When he's not around, it leaves an awful hole, doesn't it? We are much more alike than we are different. We are much more interrelated than we can even fathom." And I think what Neptune consciousness brings to us is to help to remind us to stay in a good place, try to stay heart-centered. We're affecting a lot more than we realize every day of our lives. Let's see, I guess that's the next one. I think this is the next one. I don't know. I lost my place somewhere. I'm not really sure how to. How do I go backwards? I don't know. Well, Linda, is there a way to?
Yeah, Marty, just click on page up.
Geocentric planetary nodes, and I want you to see if you, I don't know if you can see my cursor. I think you can, but the north node of Neptune is 13 degrees Leo right now. It actually happens to be retrograde. So whenever I look at, these are current transits. The sun is now in Scorpio, the moon is now in Sagittarius. And you can see here that Jupiter just moved to Sagittarius. Lost my cursor again. There we go. Just moved to Sagittarius. And you can see that the nodes have ingressed from the Capricorn, Cancer axis. And there's a lot going on now, isn't there? I'm not going to get into the world scene or the American scene, but there's a lot going on. You can almost feel these transits. Things are being shaken up. And if you look here at Neptune, the north node of Neptune and the north node of the moon, the north node is not that far from Neptune. And that means that our planetary consciousness as we know it has just transited Neptune, or been in the general area of Neptune for quite some time. And I do read the nodes and how the nodes of our planet, or the nodes of our moon, the lunar nodes, affect our planet in terms of the north node of Neptune also being an influence in that area. And you want to note that the north nodes of Neptune, Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, Uranus, and Mars, including Chiron, are all retrograde. That means they're in a particular, they represent a particular part of the sky that seems to represent that retrograde motion in relation to the Earth. And it's very interesting that these are all retrograde, reminding us of something, and the south nodes of the planets are all stationary, bringing something perhaps new or indicating something new to our consciousness. Planetary nodes and Neptune's nodes. Geocentric planetary nodes express the collective realm through the individual life. So I'm going to go back one more time and show you. These are the geocentric planetary nodes. These are the outer rings. They move very, very slowly, some through centuries. They take centuries to evolve or ingress. And when we look at these planetary nodes, they represent the collective to us. So again, this planetary lunar node, if I can find my cursor, in North Node 29 degrees Cancer, our little planet is being affected by a collective planetary node of Neptune, which is thousands of years old. Planetary nodes also reflect the individual's role in their own soul's karma. So the outer nodes, the planetary nodes that move so terribly slowly in relation to our Earth, are representing the collective to us, and we can see them in a chart and how our chart refers to them or relates to them. But they also have an individual description in the natal chart. It's not just that Neptune's North Node is in your third chart, or Uranus North Node is in your second chart. It has to do with how we relate to them. That is a very individual story. So there's both the collective and the individual application. The planetary nodes are primarily direct. Sometimes they are retrograde, as you can see in the last example right now. Many of them are retrograde, but they are primarily direct. Planetary nodes create pathways that sometimes move along with the actual transits of some of the outer planets, extending their influence. So let's look at this once more. Again, we talked about our earthly lunar nodes, or the lunar nodes as relate to the Earth, which have just transited Neptune's planetary node. So this Neptune adds influence to the lunar nodes. The north node of the moon was in Leo. I keep losing my cursor, I'm sorry. The north node of the moon was in Leo not so long ago, and it transited Leo for 18.5 years. And now it is, now it is in Cancer. And it's also on the north node of Saturn. So that is these outer planetary nodes not only affect our planet, but they affect us individually. And they also work in tandem with the transiting nodes or planets that are circling around our sun and our solar system in relation to the Earth. Okay, and when you have your transits in your chart that are on the planetary nodes or unite with the planetary nodes, this actually extends the individual's awakening process and allows this awakening process to extend the influence of the planetary nodal contact. It's a two-way street. We are affected by our transits and how they meet up with the outer planetary nodal nodes positions, and they affect us as well. For everyone alive today, the south nodes of the outer planets extend from the mid-degree, For everyone alive today, the south nodes of the outer planets extend from the mid-degrees of Sagittarius to the mid-degrees of Aquarius, creating the north nodal sphere of influence from mid-Gemini through mid-Leo. So let me show you something again. Let me back up. I know that I'm being laborious, but this is the way that my mind works. So you've got north node of Neptune here in Leo, right? Let's just look at Neptune. The south node of Neptune is in Aquarius. So the sphere of influence in terms of north node, in terms of future thinking, in terms of collective thinking, in terms of what's coming to pass, or what we're currently working on or looking at, is between the sign of Leo, basically through Gemini. This is the sphere of future thinking influence in any chart, where the north nodes of Neptune, Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, and Uranus lie. And they are a beacon to us. Excuse me, I have a cough. They are a beacon to us and lighting the way forward. Neptune's planetary nodes. Neptune's nodes for everyone on the planet are in the mid-degrees of Aquarius for the south node and the mid-degree of Leo for the north node. So let's take a look again. Neptune's nodes for everyone on the planet are south node of Neptune is 10 degrees Aquarius. North node of Neptune is 13 degrees Leo. So the Neptune sphere of influence, in the greatest sense that we astrologers can conceive of, is the south node sphere of Neptunian influence, or our past, our collective past, has something to do with Aquarius. And the north node sphere of collective influence for Neptune has something to do with Leo. These nodes are extremely sensitive points to look at in terms of our soul's growth and understanding and connecting to the collective consciousness. So if you're thinking that you're really waking up, you're really feeling things like a lot of people are, excuse me, things that you can't describe or fathom, you're just feeling them in your emotional body. That's part of this awakening with Neptune's north node, and you want to look where that falls in your chart. It's a very, very sensitive point. We evolve toward personal inward realizations that affect the whole at some point. For instance, the Leo archetype is one of the most creative points or creative archetypes of self-actualization, special purpose, special destiny, recognizing one's special gifts and talents, and immersing ourselves in pursuit of our spiritual center. And I might add, one of the highlights of Leo, what you might call evolved Leo or evolved Leo consciousness, is learning to give back. And interestingly enough, for ourselves and all of our parents' generations and their parents' generations and many, many generations to come, that north node of Neptune is in Leo, the heart center, learning to give back. Neptune and the soul. Jeffrey said the soul is immutable energy. It cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. I'd like to add to that, because I have dreams about Neptune, that source, or Neptune, so to speak, the creator, is immutable consciousness. It cannot be defined. It can only be expressed. It can only be felt. One of my favorite quotes is from Forrest Gump, where he's at his wife's grave, and he says, I don't know if we each have a destiny or if we're all just floating around accidental like on a breeze, but I think maybe it's both. Maybe both is happening at the same time. I want to show you how these Neptune's influences and the planetary nodes and the lunar nodes have an influence on our charts. Jeffrey said everything on this earth is a two-way street. Well, as you can see in any chart, and I think we'll get to it again in just a moment, in any chart you have direct motion. You have the planets going around the sun in a counterclockwise direction. In any chart, you also have a backwards direction. You have the lunar nodes going or orbiting the earth actually, but they're shown in a natal chart to be going in a clockwise direction. So we've got a weaving going on here. And there's not very much time when we have all planets direct, but there is never a time when we don't have all the planets direct and the nodes direct, because the lunar nodes the mean motion of the lunar nodes is always retrograde. They may station direct, but they don't stay there. So, like I said, there's always a weaving going on. And what I look at in terms of direct motion of the planets is it's sort of an outward, sort of a solar type of a discovery, a day-to-day ongoing discovery of sort of a linear progression of learning. And what I look at in terms of the nodes that proceed backwards through a chart, I look at that as an inward understanding and concentrating of what we really know. We're getting the lesson really well. I don't know if that makes sense. I have trouble explaining that sometimes, but there's an outward journey, an outward conscious journey. There's an inward conscious journey where we're learning to give back. We're learning to be kind. We're learning to be compassionate. We're learning to give. We're learning to relate. And that to me is represented by the lunar nodes and all of the water signs. It's represented by Pluto and Neptune. Okay, so if we're okay, this doesn't apply. Let's see here. So in terms of Neptunian consciousness, and there is no judgment in Neptunian consciousness. The weavings of our solar system and these astrological maps that we use just really show us, if you could see them in diagram, they actually look like a basket, one row going one way, one row going the other way, and they weave together concentrically over time. And these are, they trace the natural laws of karma and the observance of natural laws. And we are learning and observing and living natural law. We evolve through the absorption of the experiences that we have into our emotional body. So think for just a moment that as we learn and observe and live natural law to the best of our ability, and with Jupiter in Sagittarius right now, we're very much noticing collectively natural law, observing it and it, exploring it. At the same time, there's an inward movement. That's my whole point. There's an inward realization, and there's something that we're absorbing into our very soul, our very consciousness, as we continue in our lives. And I hope that makes a little bit of sense, because that's really the crux of the lecture that I'm giving today, is as we live and learn and go forth and grow in the sun, there's also an internal lunar evolution that's going on, that's taking all of our lessons and internalizing them so that we start to carry what we know. The retrograde motion of the lunar nodes is largely how lessons are assimilated into the emotional body. And here we go. There are both direct planetary motions happening above us at the same time as retrograde influences. It is a dance, a soul weaving, and it is a combination of the purposeful going forth and the involuntary, what we are absorbing. So again, on that note, I think it's really good to try to be in a good place, try to keep your heart in a good place. We're learning and absorbing on a much deeper level at a much rapid rate, I think, than we even realize. Uranus works hand in hand with Neptune. And Uranus and Neptune both have to do with oneness. Uranus, because it's outside of Saturn's influence, really doesn't consider time. It is a comprehension, a intellectualism or intellectual understanding that considers beyond time. Uranus reaches into the nonlinear memory and the long-term memory as much as we can even imagine or fathom. And in that sense, Uranus and its messages are a little bit more of an abstract. Uranian messages can come in dreams. They can come during the day. They can kick your butt, so to speak. They can say, go here, go there, go do this, don't go here, don't do that. And really what they are is they're electromagnetic impulses from the very deep universe that know how to get us on track, help get us to stay on our path. And they come to us rather suddenly. If we don't listen, they come back even stronger. So there are these Uranian proddings, like lightning bursts of insight, that come to everyone, whether we realize or not, and they're giving us direction. And it's they're tantamount to Neptunian consciousness. They're trying to get us in the right direction so we can yield to the lesson and really open up and see more of what there is to see. Excuse me. There exists only the field of soul reality experience that is happening in every moment, and there is no context for memory other than a universal abstract. Uranus is a distant signal that we can tune into, and the more you try, the more you can. It's trying to up our consciousness. It is a tiny, tiny part of the whole. It's not that our local mind, or where we're thinking right here, sitting in our chairs, it's not that our local mind is incapable of understanding the abstract, but our higher mind, is which Uranus represents, can bring us flashes of belonging, past lives, revelations, awakenings, like from a distant satellite. So the more we're open to those Uranian proddings, and the more we even contemplate them, or listen to something that comes to us again and again, the more we will grow in that cerebral awakening. Uranus is learning to help objectify and differentiate counterpoint awareness, the bigger picture. Uranus elevates. The messages from Uranus and the influence of Uranus in our chart is bringing us information to open our minds, to stand back, look at the bigger picture, to try to gain a different and a greater perspective of where we are. Now, early childhood trauma, abuse, or abandonment remains throughout life. Uranus also stands for unresolved trauma and the remembrance of non-resolved trauma. So because Uranus rules long-term memory, in those memories are also stored all of our early childhood trauma, which tend to affect us more than anything in life, unless we address it. Early childhood, Cancer, the moon, the fourth house, all represent what we osmose at the deepest, earliest, most innocent, vulnerable, subconscious stage humanly possible. I would say that ages 1 through 4. Uranus and Neptune, again, this is during the Pluto generation that I took from 1939 to 1957. The archetype of Aquarius is where we learn to hover, rise up, see the big picture, tantamount to Pisces, consciousness which is the big picture. You see, these are kind of hard, abstract thoughts. And it's really knocking on the door, and it's trying to wake up our consciousness. And if you think of where we are today as a nation, as a collective, as a people, there's really a square between the consciousness that we find ourselves in and how our souls are evolving on Earth. I hope you all can understand that and see that. Consciousness is really getting shook up on this Earth. Neptune and its universal consciousness, so to speak, sextiles Pluto. So here's Neptune in today's transits. And it actually sextiles Pluto. And that's actually an aspect of instigation where it expediates Pluto. So Uranus is actually, to some extent, actually expediting Neptune, and Neptune is expediting Pluto, and Uranus is square Pluto. So there's a great waking up process going on here. And I think what this really speaks to is more and more people are hearing the messages, the Uranian messages and the Neptunian messages. It's clear to see that many collective realizations of unresolved trauma and personal liberation have taken place since this generation was set spinning. It's also interesting how many recreations of our spiritual walks have freed up on the planet, and how the very concept of quantum physics and collective consciousness has piqued our interest. After all, in the Sibley chart of the United States, we have Neptune in Aquarius. Our nation was founded on spiritual freedom. So coming from nowhere, this is kind of, again, back to the first slide, but we have messages specifically from Uranus and Neptune. Uranus stands for our individuated unconscious. It's how we are differentiating and deconditioning from what we've ever known. Jeffrey wrote a book called Freedom from the Known. So Uranus is how we're learning to become our own unique individual selves. And again, a term that Jeffrey used for that is how we're coming into our own knowledge, beliefs, and truth, and having them become inwardly realized. Astrology is Uranian based, and what it does in an Uranian way is it helps us to see what we feel and bring those emotions into the open to heal. So if we had early life childhood trauma, astrology can look at that and help us to address those problems, bring them into the light and deal with them. Uranian messages come out of left field and are highly electrical. I might add erratic in nature. Sometimes they're really strange, but it's good to heed them. Okay, they tend to be erratic but repetitive, can come during the day or night, but tend to be of an immediate nature and pertain to the waking world. They can seem to be counterintuitive, of course, that's an understatement, or nonsensical. They're translated from a higher place, like getting transmissions from a satellite, go here, go there, here's the latest news. And Neptune messages, they're like whispers. They're very subtle. And Linda edited the book on Neptune Whispers from Beyond. I don't have the book in front of me, but Neptune is like whispers, and they travel as if through water. They're like electromagnetic waves to a divining rod or dowser. They come from the collective consciousness, or what we might call the collective unconsciousness. They come out of the mists, surround us and speak to our core being. They are psychic impressions like waves upon the shore, magnetic waves or pulses that we feel deeply. So we're going to feel these Neptune messages more than we are going to intellectualize them. And they come as a result of deep meditation or prayer, from immersion in nature, in an out-of-body experience, a near-death experience, or in dreams. They give us direction. Neptune is always trying to get us on our path, whatever that path is, however that path changes. They give us direction for our little lives and help connect us to the greater life, which is timeless and boundless, and how we may evolve toward the greater good, which is learning to give back and learning to relate to others. And that I equate with the planetary north node of Neptune in Leo, big-heartedness, open-heartedness. Now, Neptune really is a path. And if we're on a path, Neptune is going to illuminate that path for us. That's what the messages and the whispers are. It's going to try to say, yes, you're going in the right direction. Or if you get a feeling, a very strong feeling, you're going to feel, no, I don't want to go that direction. I want to turn around and go back. So it's like sort of prodding us along the path, go this way, go this way, go this way, almost like a little dog nipping at our heels. The spontaneity and degree of these messages can have to do with where the gravity of our consciousness lies. So if the gravity of our consciousness is in the egocentric body, which is more of a look at me, this is what I'm doing, this is what I have to do, this is my role in life, these messages from Neptune may not be as profound. But if we are entering into soul consciousness, knowing that we are an immortal soul in a body, and we extend forever, and we've come from Creator, these messages might make a little bit more sense and be a little bit more well received. And if we're drifting toward unity consciousness, which is the consciousness of the masters and the great teachers that have walked the earth, that is ruled by Neptune, these consciousness would pervade our waking state, and there would be no way we could escape them. They would be ever present. Neptune is reflective. It's water. It's the gentle reminders of who we are and who we have always been. It's our essence. It's gentle reminders that we're on the right river, the universal and timeless voice, and that all existence is sheer energy. I'm going to start skimming through this. I don't know how we're doing on time, but
just let me know when you'd like to break for 15 minutes.
Has it been an hour, Linda?
In 5 minutes, it will have been an hour.
Okay,
it will be an hour.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So I'm repeating myself, and I'm just going to say that Neptune is awakening to innocence. I think I've said all of this already. One thing I do want to add before I continue is when you look at the backward, so to speak, motion of planetary movement in a chart, the first thing you notice is the nodes of the moon. The nodes aren't planet, they're points in space. But the nodes of the moon move backwards in a chart. And in my opinion, that's deepening the lesson. That's getting to know what you know on a really deep somatic level. And in my opinion, retrogrades, which are going backwards through the chart, are doing the same thing. And Jeffrey said about retrogrades it's like peeling the layers off an onion to get to your true essential self, or what he called to get to the inner realization. So both the lunar nodes and retrogrades travel backwards through a chart, and they're all increasing and deepening what we already know, getting us to reflect, withdraw, rebel, retreat, take another look at what we already know, because we're always learning, we're always deepening, there's no end to it. And then if you look at the precession of the equinoxes, interestingly enough, the precession point moves backwards through a chart as well. Not through a chart, but precession moves backwards throughout the astrological plane, astrological sphere. And right now we're on the point between Pisces and Aquarius. We're on the cusp of the age of Aquarius. So that means we're pretty much at 0 point Pisces, and we're pretty much ingressing to 29 degrees Aquarius. And if you look at that, we've gone backwards. The precession point in the equinoxes has continued backwards for about 2,400 years, from the end point of Pisces to the beginning point of Pisces. And now we're again embarking upon the end degree, or the 29th degree of Aquarius. Well, it's going backwards in terms of direct planetary motion, or how we're normally used to looking at the sun progressing through signs. And what that means to me, and what that speaks to me, is that we're getting the lesson of Pisces really well. This is really deep stuff. But what I see in terms of all backward movement is that it's getting the lesson ingrained, not only upon ourselves, our generation, but many generations before us and many generations to come, with the approaching of the Aquarian age right now, and the equinox point, the precession point at 0 degrees Pisces. We're starting to really wake up on a earth, and generations will continue to wake up on this earth, that we don't have to suffer to be spiritual, that we can believe what we want to believe, that we can believe in a tree, that we can link to Creator the way that we want to, and that we can help others do the same. We're waking up to our spiritual freedom. And this is what we carry. Whatever we wake up to, whatever the inward growth is what we carry. We carry it through all eternity. And it can change and grow and adapt and deepen, but it all evolution takes place through the emotional body. And the nodes are radar. They're telling us things, and it depends on our evolutionary state. It depends on our level of consciousness, but the nodes are always radar. They're telling us things, and it's really important to pay attention to them. I had a teacher named Red Eagle before I met Jeffrey, who said the nodes of the moon are emotional barometer. So how we feel and the message that we're getting on a feeling basis is really, really important to us in our soul's continuance and our happiness. And if we look back to our individual south nodes in our charts, we're going to see a gem or a seed of something that can be addressed and can become a jewel in our lives. So don't think that the south node is bad and the north node is good. Just think of it as an ever deepening process. The basis, and I'll quit in just a moment, Linda. The basis of EA is observation and correlation. So the more we observe nature and then look at a chart, or observe a person and look at their chart, the more that we're going to learn, and the more that EA is going to fall upon us. The realizations of EA are going to fall upon us. You observe a person or a place and thing or something that's happening in time, and then you look at the chart. And then you look at the chart again and you observe what's happening. And that's how we learn in more depth what evolutionary astrology is really all about. And I think that you could call it forensic astrology or anthropological astrology. I mean, it's so deep, it goes very deep into a situation or a person's life or a situation, so that you can see beneath the floorboards and see what's really going on. I want to mention real quickly, there's 3 ways that we can naturally evolve. And one is through relationship with another person, place, or thing. One is through obsession with another person, place, or thing. And one is through our God-given talents. And what we're going to focus on in the chart today is the God-given talents of an individual. I think we'll skip that. I'm going to see how many I can skip here real quickly, Linda. And the person that we're going to look at, the chart that we're going to look at is, in my opinion, in what's called third stage individuated, transitioning to first stage spiritual. And there are three main evolutionary states in evolutionary astrology. There's consensus, individuated, and spiritual. And I do see, without going into taking time and going into a lengthy explanation, the person we're going to discuss today or this evening is third stage individuated, transitioning to first stage spiritual. And third stage individuated souls may feel or realize that they are radically different from polite society or the status quo, and they may find self-pride, freedom of expression, and identity in their own unique perspective. But third stage individuated people are really learning to give back. They're learning to give back, and let's see if I can, they may feel different and alone, ostracized, a funny kind of aloneness. This is how Jeffrey described it, a funny kind of silence, like they're unseen and unheard. But they also may contain a particular type of genius due to their proclivity toward eccentricity. They can, however, be hyper aware of their unique special talents and abilities, the Leo polarity, and begin to learn to give back to society while still maintaining their unique viewpoints, ideas, and revelations. The Pluto paradigm is the root cause of any chart. We're going to look at that in just a moment. Jeffrey said what you need to do is understand the archetype behind the various things that you are describing, because once you understand the archetype, the issue, the causal factor versus the symptom, then we can address it. You can figure out a strategy to work with it. So that's a very Uranian statement, in that once we find out what the root cause or the problem of any person or situation is, then we can address it and start to work with it. Okay, we're done, Linda. We're back for part 2 of Neptune out of the blue, the quantum narrative. And here's a chart. And I'm new to this. I guess I don't know when I hear anybody else or anyone else chimes in, but I'll just go ahead and talk about the chart, and maybe we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. And I do want to apologize to Linda. I misquoted her book. She did edit the book on Neptune, written by Jeffrey, called Whispers from Eternity. Okay, so this is a chart we're going to be looking at. And as you can see, the individual, I don't know if I have a pointer, but I'll try. The individual was born Libra in the 12th house with a huge stellium. So this, to me, is of tremendous interest because I'm very Neptune oriented. So here we have Libra, the 12th house, conjunct Venus and Mercury, which are not surprising. And Libra, Neptune itself was in Libra at that time. So there's a lot of weight right here on the 12th house. And then, of course, Pluto, which you want to look at according to the Pluto paradigm, is in Leo. So he is of the Leo generation. And his Pluto is in the 10th house, which speaks to us to some degree of having past life memory of prominence or being in control or being very well-to-do or very well-connected, having a voice in the exterior world, and perhaps being a person of prominence or importance, having power and control to some degree, and respectability, and being in the public, perhaps it could have been a political signature. The Pluto polarity point is actually his moon. So in many ways, this individual is learning to let go of exterior effects and exterior definitions of himself, and he's looking for emotional highs and lows this lifetime. He's looking to develop the emotional body, moon in Aquarius, 4th house. And then if we look at what squares, and then the nodal axis is how these intentions, these soul intentions, are actually actualized. And if you look at something that represents pretty much his literal past, not only this life, but past lives, we have the South Node in Virgo in the 11th house of unresolved trauma, conjunct Saturn, which can stand for the parent in some cases. And we have the North Node in Pisces in the 5th house. So you can see, as we've already talked about when I talked so much about the planetary North Node of Neptune being at 13 degrees Leo, how this is going to interest me. Here we have a similar signature, North Node of the Moon for this person's lifetime, what they're learning. It's in Pisces in the 5th house of Leo. So is this person learning to give back of his or her special talents? Absolutely, in spades, big time. They're learning to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, not depend on anyone else, discover their own greatness, declare their own greatness, and really accentuate their inner being and their inner sun and their inner light and give it to the world. It's something they have to do. And then what squares the nodes, of course, is going to be Mars and Sagittarius and Chiron. So there's a big ancient wound here with this Mars, something that the person, has probably been working on for lifetimes. And it's also something that the person could have carried over from the parents' generation. The Mars squares the South Node, Saturn, in Virgo, which can carry a lot of guilt with it and shame. And it also squares the North Node, Pisces, which is someone realizing to open up to their inner genius and the creative talents and gifts that they have and give them to the world. And how does the person combine that? And before I move on, because this is a large chart, I want to show you one thing. The way that I look at this chart and what really struck me was that the North Node of Neptune right here in 13 degrees Leo is in the 9th house near the MC. And so is the Pluto. So this Pluto's evolutionary journey has for a long time been predicated on the North Node of Neptune and what that means to others. And because this person is in a rather advanced evolutionary state, what I said, I described them as being third stage individuated, transcending to first stage spiritual. This person is going to have a higher awareness, definitely going to have a higher awareness. They came in with a higher awareness, probably a higher awareness than most people. And they were probably aware of this higher awareness. And they have special gifts and talents that they want to give back, but they're going to live a life of separateness and aloneness and ostracization and feeling like they're not seen or heard or understood. And that's what comes a lot with what is carried by genius and with third stage individuated souls. They just feel like they don't fit in, that nobody understands them. But with his unique expression, he has something to give back to the world. And Pisces is a collective. And here's how he relates and gives back to the collective right here is Neptune in the 9th house. So when you see a chart that you can relate to and it starts to click, the themes are repeated over and over and over again. Over and over and over again. And how does he give back to the collective? Well, it's through the house of Sagittarius. It's teaching and it's allowing other people to believe what they want to. It's also through his incredible intuitive powers and his powers to translate other people's feelings and tell their stories. That's how he gives back to the collective. Interesting, isn't it? Okay. Okay. North Node in Pisces in the 5th house. These slides are not, well, I didn't go over them to try to pare them down, and I'm so sorry. I'm going to go through them as quickly as I can. Right here you have the Virgo Pisces lunar nodes, as you can see, which so much interests me. It can denote a chart with highly retrograde tendencies. Now, why would Virgo Pisces be more of a retrograde tendency axis in a chart than another? Because to me, Pisces represents the return home, the return to simplification, the return to our true essence, the return to our inwardly realized understanding of ourself and the universe. So when I have a North Node in Pisces, to me, that's a very retrograde or internal type of a signature. And that's just my interpretation of it. Current lunar nodal axis reflects lifetimes of ping-ponging back and forth in search of balance. Yeah, well, any nodal axis is going to reflect that. I liken the internalization process to a distillation process of growing toward your true, innate soul nature, your essential self. This person's doing that again in spades because they have a highly Neptunian chart. They're coming to see who they are in essence, and really weeding out what they aren't and what they don't need. Saturn conjunct the South Node in Virgo is applying pressure. The South Node is applying pressure to Saturn, which can be likened to a retrograde process, causing Saturn to rebel, withdraw, and retreat. So whatever issues she has with a parent, it's not going to be easy with the South Node in Virgo in the 11th house to deal with those issues with the parent. There's always going to be separation between the two, needless to say. Because the South Node is applying pressure, and the direction of the retrograde node is applying pressure to Saturn there. So we can see some real issues here between the person and the parent, and it goes back generations. So it's deepening the lessons learned, puts even greater emphasis on the 5th house North Node as a way out, as direction that he can view and grow toward. His personal Saturn is evolving. Yeah, okay, the North Node, excuse me, let me back up. The South Node in Virgo puts even greater emphasis on the 5th house North Node as direction that his personal Saturn is evolving toward. So he has a personal Saturn as well, an inner authority, someone who wants to be responsible and wants to be in charge and wants to do a good job. And that is allowing himself to do it through his creative abilities, North Node in Pisces. And it will also help him to individuate and differentiate and yearn for soul essence and communion with Creator. Pisces is communing with Creator. So it's obvious to achieve the realization of Pisces North Node in the 5th, the individual would need to roll up their sleeves and immerse themselves in some really earthly work, service and dedication down here to achieve that realization. So this person is really looking to find their own work ethic. Pisces is the highest, purest, most limitless, eternal form of inward realization possible to a body on earth, where they're trying to really transmute that work ethic and their desire to be reliable and in charge and to be seen into the 5th house signature North Node. And how do they translate that? It's going to be something to do with the arts, that's for sure, Pisces 5th house. Pisces unification, the highest perspective, is how we learn to hover, question, rise up, gain perspective and momentum, tantamount to flying. So wherever you see a preponderance of Pisces energy or Uranian energy for that matter, the 11th and 12th houses are where we learn to lift up and gain a higher perspective. And he has repeated 11th and 12th house themes. He has Jupiter in Aquarius retrograde to the Aquarius moon. He has a preponderance of Neptunian energy, not only the North Node of Neptune on the MC, but he also has the Pisces South North Node and a preponderance of 12th house Pisces archetypal energy. And this person is learning really by the seat of their pants this lifetime, and he's learning to just let go and follow that stream. He's learning to find that little boat on the river that will carry his soul. He's knocked on some hard, had some hard knocks through life, but eventually he's learning to let go and release and let God. And here is the chart of the aspects. And what I almost always look at to begin with is Uranus. Uranus is actually an aspect to the moon, but it's a little known aspect. It's called a quintile, and the quintile is 165 degrees. So here's Uranus in Cancer retrograde. And here's the quintile, if you can see it, to the moon. And the quintile aspect is one of obsession or near opposition, and it's similar to a inconjunct in that it wants to correct itself, but it's kind of correcting itself at the last minute. Yeah, it's about 165 degrees from the moon. And when I look at this, this is his whole chart. The Uranus stands with unresolved trauma in Cancer, the family, retrograde, going through it again, affecting his moon. It is a soft aspect, but to me, it speaks to his whole chart and what's unresolved and what's the undercurrents that are guiding his lifetime, this lifetime. It all has to do with the mother, his emotional maturity, his emotional insights, the moon in Uranus, and emotional resolutions. So I want to show you, I'm going to try a little bit of the video, Linda. And what I want to do is I really want to predicate this fifth house. This is what he's coming from in terms of a soul's understanding this lifetime. He's coming from parental control. He's coming from parental persuasion. And he's learning to really redo his worth ethic to express what he wants to do. And there is probably a lot of guilt and shame handed down in this signature as well that he has to process and not own anymore, because he's highly individuating this lifetime. So Linda, what I'm going to try to do is go to another program. And I think, let's see.
Okay, we'll just pause here and get that organized, okay?
Okay, that's the end of the clip.
Thank you.
Okay, so this chart is Tom Petty, and I use a different chart than my colleagues, many of my colleagues. The explanation is way too far to go into. It would take an entire hour itself, but I fell upon this chart, and I have, if anybody wants to contact me, I'd love to tell them the story, and the story of charts before this one as well, because it's absolutely amazing. It was a series of synchronicities, and this lecture started out on synchronicity, and then it turned into just Tom's life story. But I fell upon this chart from much research, much meditation and dreaming, and a wonderful, deeply kind, brilliant person who helped me corroborate that information. So thank you to that individual. Without her, this lecture would not take place. So this is Tom Petty's chart. I've rectified it to a morning chart, which is a little different, of course, than what other people have used. But as you can see, it's a highly Plutonic chart as well. There's a lot of water in this chart. You got Pluto on the MC, and Scorpio rising. And one of the ways that I really rectified this chart was Scorpio rising, which is pretty obvious if you really dig and research and, like I said, meditate and work on his life and ask. You just ask and let the message come back to you. It's a very Neptunian process. The man was deep. He was very deep, and he was multi-layered, and he had bouts of depression, and he had his inner circle and his outer circle, and you didn't penetrate that. And also one of the ways that I was able to really rectify it, because I was given a relative time of birth, was Pluto at the MC, but really conjunct Neptune here, the planetary node of Neptune, that spoke so much to me that he was really giving back to collective consciousness and really helping to unite people. And that's what his Pluto was doing and had been doing for some time. Let's see here real quickly. It's a highly somatic chart. He's trying to relate to the inner journey in an attempt to heal on a soul level. I'm sorry if you can't see all this. I didn't have time to really redo these slides. But highly somatic. He's feeling on a very deep level, and he's dealing with things this lifetime. One of the things that I really see about this chart is he's stopping the buck this lifetime. He wants to look at things. It's almost like Uranus realized and Neptune revealed. He wants to look at things. He's redoing the unresolved trauma, and it's through the lens of Cancer. And I'll get into that in just a little bit, but he's looking at things, he's dealing with things this lifetime, and it's a lifetime of great resolution. And I think things that he's been working on a soul level for many lifetimes that he's trying to break through this lifetime. With Saturn in the 11th house of unresolved trauma, anybody who knows his story knows that he was beaten by his father at 4 years old. The beating started at 4 years old. His father was a rage alcoholic, and little Tom was getting the brunt of that because he was a little bit different and didn't always, play by the rules. But he didn't always know at 4 years old. You don't know what the rules are yet. You're too young. And this, of course, traumatized him and carried through all of his lifetime. And his release was music. 5th house, Pisces, North Node. I know it sounds like a cliche, but he literally poured himself into the music. And what a gift that was to the world in terms of Piscean energy. He was giving of his heart and his heart related and his special gifts. And that's not only what healed him or began the healing on a soul level, but it's something that was imparted to the world and caused unity within the world. And how many kids out there in the the 70s through the 21st century were riding on Tom's themes and stories and narratives of a hard life and coming from nowhere and being nothing and wanting to give up. And look what he did with himself. He was a shining example of what the heart can do and what the heart can create. And he put it, like I said, he put it all into music. And I don't know if we're going to get to all the clips or not. We might not, but that might be subject for another lecture if possible. But he does have Mars squaring the nodes. And what he had to come in contact with this life was his own volition, his own inner drives and desires to really live, because he really lost that life force at times throughout his life. And with the Saturn on the South Node, he did not have much of a relationship at all, so to speak, with his dad. There's too many instances to relate. I can't talk fast enough, but he really did use that to push him toward a higher level of expression. And this was his outlet, his retreat, his sanctuary was music and writing. And as you could see in the clips, he took that very seriously. His music was his work. And he would have done it anyway. He would have done it no matter what. He was meant to do it. This is his gift to God and the world. Pisces, North Node, 5th house. He does have a stellium. Let's see. My internet connection is unstable. Let's see here. Let's see what I can do here. He's wanting to deepen his consciousness. He's wanting relationship with the infinite, but he's really quite shy. So how does he do that? Again, through music on a stage. One of the things that he said to his right-hand man, Mike Campbell, who played lead guitar for him, one day when Mike was having a really hard time and having personal problems, he looked at him on a break and spoke to him off mic and said, "You know something, Mike, nothing can touch you up here." And the stage and his expression and his music were his sanctuary. They were his time out. They were that place that he went to, of course, when he was repeatedly abused as he was growing up, and a place that he retreated to. And again, that South Node, once he learned to embrace it as he matured and he could see more clearly and he could gain Uranian perspective, whether he knew he was gaining it or not, once his mind could fathom what happened to him in early childhood, he addressed it and he used it to push himself forward. He said he didn't want to end up like his dad or be like his dad, and he used it to sort of get out of that rut and break that cycle of abuse from father to son, because his father had been abused as well. As you can see, there's a lot to go into here, but I'm going to try to get the crux of it. And you can see he has a South Node in Virgo, so he has acquired guilt. Or he has, assumed guilt. He's taken on the guilt of his father. His father never thought he was anything or could make anything. And when Tom was very little, he didn't want to walk in his father's shoes. He didn't want to peddle things and be a salesman and take on sort of the shame of the family, so to speak. He didn't want to carry that on. So he found, like I said, he found a way out. And that guilt and that shame that were imprinted upon his soul, so to speak, were something that followed him for the rest of his life, and he was always trying to be responsible, care for the family, and take care of himself and others. And you can see that he's born Libra in the 12th house, which is very much outwardly an outwardly assumed lifestyle, but he's trying to find the relationship within himself and between him and his creator. So he was in charge of a lot of people, band members, family, friends, friends and family, and he worked very hard. He worked and wrote songs constantly to pay the bills and to keep things, the wheels moving, and to keep people functioning, because he had a very large extended family, moon in Aquarius. And so he found his own work ethic, which is really fascinating to me. And he is deconditioning greatly from everything he's ever known this lifetime. He's got a lot on his plate this lifetime, trying to seek balance in so many areas of his life, and also trying to consume or control that anger that was so evident in his father. This is Mars conjunct Chiron in the second house of self-determination and self-survival, self-sustainment. He became a perfectionist at some point, and he worked so hard on his music. He was the first one to the studio and the last one to leave. He said it was a very, very lonely life, but he had to do it. And at one point he was perfecting a song. I think this was in the early 80s. He was perfecting a song to a degree where he'd been working on it for months. And again, his songs and his music were his livelihood. He had so many people relying on him that he felt he had to do it, and he worked at it. It was a job for him. It wasn't just his release and his sanctuary. He made it work. And so when you see Mars and the built up, pent up anger and the Chiron, the sort of the self-undoing here in the second house, these are things he has to overcome. They're a skip step. And the South node to consistently integrate, the node to consistently integrate is actually the South node in the 11th house. So what he has to do is embrace his father's handed down or inherited guilt and shame, and his father's viewpoints as well, and transmute them into something positive that he could create and give to the world. So during the skip step, I think it was in the early 80s, he was perfecting a song for months. He couldn't get it right, and he felt that he absolutely had to. And so he listened to the first tape of the song that he'd done months before, and it was better than the last one that he'd worked so hard on. And he smashed his fist into a wall and broke the bones in his fist. And that happened to be I believe it was his left fist, and it was his cord hand. And so he was out of commission for another several months while the hand healed. And he said he learned there to control his temper, because right here you can see the self-damage and the self-undoing and the self-unraveling, where he actually damaged himself physically in order to bring home a hard lesson of, be easy on yourself, be as kind to yourself, give to yourself what you would give to others. Don't damage yourself and be so hard on yourself, which comes from a lesson from the ingrained information or assumed information from generations in the 11th house, and also from his Sun in Libra and the preponderance of Libra in energy, where he's always giving to others. He has to learn to give to himself. Sagittarius rules the second house of self-sustainment, self-love, self-confidence. It's in the sign of Jupiter. It's in the sign of Sagittarius. And Sagittarius rules his retrograde Jupiter, which is applying pressure to his sun. His moon. He has to learn the lesson of conceptual knowledge and intuition and following his right brain and his loves and the allowance that comes from that freedom of thought in order to thrive and continue and continue his work and continue his walk. And of course, the 5th house is in Pisces. We've already gone over that. He's doing what he loved, and he found that he could actually, find self-forgiveness in doing what he loved. His father said he was afraid when he left the house that he would starve to death. And he didn't really get any kind of resolution from his father until about his father's last year, probably months before he passed away. His father didn't say he was sorry, but he said he was wrong. And he said he was afraid that young Tom would never make it, and that he never understood what he's doing, and that he would starve to death death, but he had told his father that if he just left him alone, that he would be a millionaire before the age 30, and indeed he was. And he had told his father and his family to just let him do what he needed to do. He didn't need another job to fall back on or any other training. He was going to make it. He was going to make it. And that's where you see what we saw in the clips, where he was going to do what he was going to do no matter what. He's very determined. He's a very aware individual, and he's expanding his conscious through the emotional body this lifetime, and learning to really value and appreciate who he is as a soul and what he stands for, and not live in anybody else's world or ideas or belief systems. He is effectively rebirthing himself this lifetime. But it's so obvious in the symbols, and it's repeated over and over again. I'm not going to go into the Jupiter retrograde. That's a quote from Jeffrey, but he's telling us, Jeffrey is saying when you have Jupiter retrograde, especially toward the moon, for heaven's sakes, that you're learning not to be dependent on other people and to feel security in what you believe and find the truth in manifest creation, as opposed to what other people might be teaching or what you might see around you or what is observed in polite society, so to speak. And he has Uranus retrograde and Jupiter retrograde. And of course, the retrograde planets are what brings us back to a clearer sense of our true essential self and brings us in touch with our inner realizations. And the retrograde planets, again, Jeffrey described it as having a funny kind of aloneness where you're unseen and unheard and misunderstood. But they're really helping him to see in a larger light how he needs to connect to source in order to create his music and not depend on other people or what they say or their opinions. And it was just that connection to source that he got in dreams, that he got in visions. The man was a channel that lent him the music that enabled him to build his life and strengthen his life and live the life that he wanted to live. And also I want to mention that I'm going to go back one slide real quickly, that this signature of Jupiter retrograde to the moon is what is referred to by an oblique retrograde to the moon. It makes the moon retrograde by oblique. So that's a very inward journey of who am I, how do I, what is my philosophy on life, really pondering a lot about truth and nature and God, and not going by anyone else's standards or definitions. The man said even though he was in the company of others, he was alone a lot with his thoughts. And Jupiter playing retrograde to the moon in Aquarius is going to be, how do I think? How do I conceptualize? Can I rely on my intuition? And he did come to rely on his intuition this lifetime. It's a highly somatic chart, highly water-based, highly emotional. He's coming to believe in the divine feminine within. And it's interesting to note also that, before I move on, that his father early in life really put him down. He was verbally as well as physically abusive. And he thought of young Tom as a dreamer. He thought he'd never make it. He thought he'd, never be able to make a living. And he told him so, but there were moments in his life when his father softened. There were 2 times when he bought him a guitar, and it just blew Tom's mind. He couldn't believe it. His father was contributing to him in that way. This was a man who had physically abused him. And like I said, he had told, but he at the same time was telling Tom, you'll never make it. Don't grow your hair long. You're a dreamer. And Tom was this sort of soft-spoken, mild-mannered young kid. And in some ways, his dad was sending him the message that you're too effeminate. You're being too effeminate in life, which I'm sure hurt him greatly. So we talked about the retrograde effect on his moon, which deepens him and gives him even a deeper, more internalized personality, where he would relate to others and then go into his closet, so to speak, and try to relate to his creator, just be alone with creator, and listen to the music that came from above. And these retrogrades are something he's been trying to work on for some time. Jupiter retrograde again. I do want to look at this real quickly. Jeffrey said that when you have a Jupiter retrograde to the moon, this would manifest as soul creating egocentric structures that need to rebel against any external belief system. And he also went on to say that, in essence, to rebel against all artificial beliefs that have simply been invented by humans, that have nothing to do with the actual truth, or what is actually true does not need any beliefs, because what is inherently true is simply true. Typically in this sort of symbol, the soul involved has been in the evolutionary process of rebelling against all kinds of beliefs that it has accepted at previous points in its journey. The ongoing evolutionary intent is for the soul to align itself with the natural truths or laws of the manifest creation that do not require any beliefs whatsoever. This evolutionary process naturally leads to the consciousness of such a soul to be rooted in the right, nonlinear brain that can naturally intuit the inherent truth of anything. Well, again, he had a right-based intuitive brain, even though his father put him down for it. I think it, in some point, in some ways, it even propelled him even more to make it in the music world, and to make it on his intuition and his concepts and his ability to receive and relate narrative. And I think that he knew that he had to do it, so he worked very hard at it. And what a gift that was to the world. So I might just go through, I might just try to sum this up. How long do we have, Linda?
15 minutes.
Okay. I will go as quickly as I can here. Integrating the nodes. Okay, well, he's consistently integrating the south node in the 11th house. That was the last node to pass the skip step, or conjunct the skip step Mars. So we've already seen that. He's learning to take care of himself this lifetime, with his sun at 26 degrees Leo or Libra. That's quite a that's the sun immersed in Libra, and it tends to give to others and not give to themselves. Well, he's learning to give back to himself this lifetime. And the way that he's doing it is to trust his natural voice of intuition, Sagittarius, second house. And in his songs of learning to fly, rebels, I think he had another song called Dreaming the Dream. All of these songs are learning to use your intuition, and he shared them on stage in Spotlight with other people and influenced them to open up their intuitive, right brain, conceptual brain, and do the same and free themselves from constricting thoughts or other people's beliefs. And one of the things he did on stage so uniquely was he would just get a little bit of a vibe going or a song going, and he'd stand and open his arms and say, I want you to feel free. I want you to let go of all your troubles. Try to believe that they're not here, and that they can't touch you. And then he would sing a song like Learning to Fly or Refugee or something of that sort. But a lasting and continuing thread in his songs was free your mind, free your conscience, free your thinking mind, and let it travel, and just imagine the places that it can go to. And in doing so, he was also healing himself. Okay, he's finally learning to trust and listen to himself, his own innate voice, his own intuitive mind, encouraging others to do the same thing. He was a channel. He has the moon in Aquarius. He's receiving a lot of messages. Tom did his share of drugs, but there's a really great, people would say that he would lean his head back even as in a session. There's one great story that I like to tell. He was in a session playing a song, practicing it. They all had headphones on, and they looked at him, and he wasn't playing along with them. He was with them. He was in his own world, and he was hearing, he had turned his headphones off. He was hearing another song in those headphones. And he said, hey, this is a whole lot better than what you're doing. And they were just staring at him because he, like I said, something was falling on him, and they knew to stop and listen and really engage him and see what was coming from him. I'm trying to think of the name of the song. I'll think of it in a moment, but it's a wonderful song, and it just came through. It just channeled down to him like, you know, like light from the sky. And these were many episodes. He did this many times. Uranus is in the 8th house of Cancer. He spoke to people from beyond. He saw them in dreams. He spoke to his mother after she left. She came to him in a dream. He wrote a beautiful song about it called Southern Accent, which I think is one of his most beautiful somatic songs written. I want to mention a little bit about the Jupiter retrograde to the moon. Now, on his father's side, he did have a Cherokee grandmother. So Tom was, in essence, a quarter Cherokee from his father's side. So I think not only was he hearing about people from beyond and listening to people beyond and seeing people in dreams that would visit him from beyond, but he was also getting urgings and signs and symbols and proddings from perhaps the native side of his family. And I would not be a bit surprised if they were musical and if his Cherokee grandmother was speaking to him often and encouraging him on and encouraging him to find his natural voice. And they said that even with his, the ones that he regarded so much, the other musicians that he regarded so much, they say that sometimes their rhythms or their little bridges or their little musical harmonies would seem to come into his music. And his band members said it was as if he was channeling other musicians. So that's Uranus in the 8th house. And it's retrograde. It's going back into time and perhaps past life musical associations. We talked about the Jupiter moon. He's going to receive many voices. It's a Jupiter moon that's letting him open up his intuition and his creativity to his right brain. He's incorporating many voices from the past, translating their stories. The moon is in Aquarius. It's incredibly receptive to old information, soul memory, long-term memory from the past. He's putting all of this into his songs, and it repeats over and over again. So we had a lot of help. I knew that if you went to his closet, so to speak, and did it, that it would come in. And that was helping to liberate him from the Saturnian conditions of his life. I think we're going to wind this down here because we're talking a lot about Uranus. And like I said, I didn't have time to really go over all these slides. Let me see what I get to if I just scroll down, and then maybe stop with another clip if we have 5 minutes. Yeah, Uranus retrograde. Early childhood trauma followed him all his life. What I'm going to leave on is what astrology does for me is it deepens the person's story. Again, you get to see under the floorboards. You get to see what's really going on and driving them. And there are really many factors driving him this lifetime that helped kind of break the seed of the South Node, so to speak, and encourage him to give back of his special talents and gifts. And to me, that was fated. That was absolutely near fated. So what he grew into as he got older is what his friend Mike Campbell called a nice Southern gentleman, a mellow Southern gentleman. And he said that he saw Tom through all his trials and travails grow into someone that he really deeply loved and admired, because he knew he had a lot of pain in his life. He'd struggled with a lot of addiction and deep depression, and pulled himself out of it with the help of his friends. But I think what he's really been dealing with his entire life is perhaps the shame and the guilt surrounded by his mother's passing and how he wasn't there with her. And like I said, that's a whole nother story. But his father was a bit of a scoundrel throughout his life. And like I said, during his father's last year, he did call young Tom and said, "I'm proud of you. You were right and I was wrong." So there was a little bit of that resolution for Tom in his lifetime. But if you look at a progressed chart, I'm sorry, we don't have time to do that right now, he does have Jupiter progressed in his chart, which means that this internal compass that he learned to find, wondering if he was right or wrong or going in the right direction, really was right all along. All he has to do is believe in himself. Jupiter progressed. And he had said many times in his life, he wondered if he was too hard on his father, because like I said, his father was a real scoundrel at times. But he said, no, he's done what he thought was right. He took the road that he thought was best and would help teach his father. And in the end, he did get a message from his father relating his approval of Tom's life. And I think all his life with the Uranus and the 8th house Cancer retrograde, he was always kind of regretting. Uranus does not go direct by progression, by the way. He was always kind of regretting and reliving and rethinking the guilt that came, or he thought came, with perhaps not being there to defend his mother, because he left his childhood home very early, and she did suffer abuse along with his brother in the hands of his father. So I think he's taken that on. He's looked at it. He's dealing with it. He's with his mother now, and he's turned into a wonderful, mellow gentleman. And I just want to leave on a last note. Do I have time to show a really short clip, Linda?
Yes, how long is it?
It's probably just about a minute and a half.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So I want to show you his North Node in Pisces, 5th house, and the note that he left on, and how he matured, like I said, as a very feeling individual from his very troubled and traumatic childhood.
Okay, Marty, that's great. I don't know whether that video will come through very well because you needed to have shared your computer sound.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So any final words, or do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, Marty, wow. Well, thank you for putting in so much work into that. It was very detailed, and thank you so much from all of us. Would you all please thank Marty Dixon, everyone?
Thank you, Marty. That was just absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, Marty. That was special.
Thank you all. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Marty. See you next time. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.